Okay. Good evening. This webinar is being recorded. We are now live on Facebook and on this webinar. Dr. Heath, I hand this over to you.
Thank you, Betsy. Welcome everybody to this evening's, or to the seventh Race in Optometry webinar. Certainly, we at the SUNY College of Optometry are very pleased to be hosting this series. It's been an important part of the conversation and dialogue over the past 4 years. To kick off this evening's conversation, we're very honored and I'm very pleased to have a very special guest. Dr. John B. King Jr., Chancellor of the State University of New York, SUNY System. I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with him for the past 18 months. Dr. King became Chancellor of SUNY, the largest comprehensive public health higher education system in the nation, in January of 2023. A lifelong leader in public education, equity, and opportunity for students, Chancellor King served in President Barack Obama's cabinet as the 10th U.S. Secretary of Education. Born in Brooklyn, New York, Chancellor King began his career as a high school social studies teacher and then a middle school principal, eventually becoming New York State's first African American and first Puerto Rican Commissioner of Education. Chancellor King holds a Bachelor of Arts in Government from Harvard University, a JD from Yale Law School, as well as both a Master of Arts in Teaching of Social Studies and a Doctorate in Education from Teachers College at Columbia. Quite a background. I hope everybody will join me in welcoming Chancellor King. Dr. King, I'm going to turn this over to you. We look forward to your comments.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this event today. Can't tell you how excited I am to participate. First, let me start by thanking Dr. Heath, not only for the kind introduction, but for your long and invaluable service to SUNY Optometry. You will be sorely and sadly missed, Dr. Heath. And let me also thank Dr. Joy Harewood and our panelists for their participation today, and the Office of Continuing Education for pulling this all together. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about how we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion across the whole SUNY system, because I think it's important and hopefully parallel some of what you'll hear from the leading experts shortly. It's certainly with tremendous pride and gratitude that I say this to you. SUNY was established 75 years ago to, and I'm quoting from our founding documents, provide to the people of New York educational services of the highest quality with the broadest possible access, fully representative of all segments of the population in a complete range of academic, professional, and vocational post-secondary programs. So when I say, and I say it a lot, that SUNY is the best public higher education system in the world, that founding principle is one reason I feel justified. And on the topic of racial diversity, it's worth pointing out the tremendous strides SUNY Optometry has made. A decade of hard work or more has seen applications from members of underrepresented minorities double, acceptances quadruple, and matriculants triple to about 15% of the 2023 entering class. But as proud as I am of that progress at SUNY Optometry, and as proud as I am of the longstanding intention of the SUNY system as a whole toward diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as much as I believe my institution, this institution, has strived to live up to it, and as much as I know SUNY has done better than most, I also know that we have too often fallen short, and we have to look at that history, even as we move into this new era following the Supreme Court's decision on race-conscious admissions. I'll note that very few of SUNY's 64 campuses ever use race-conscious admissions extensively, because the vast majority of our institutions are not exclusive and traditionally have been able to accept all qualified candidates regardless of race. But there are exceptions to that, and important ones. Certainly SUNY Optometry, our university centers, our academic medical centers have had the opportunity to leverage that tool, and they, along with other highly selective institutions in the country now are without a very powerful tool for making our college campuses diverse. And the reality is the Supreme Court has smashed a tool that was specifically engineered to bring more Black, Latino, and Indigenous students to study and live on our campuses, a thing which, when it happens, enriches institutions, elevates those students, and betters our classrooms, our communities, and our nation. And so those Supreme Court decisions and the broader national assault on diversity, equity, and inclusion is a threat, not only to our ability to foster student diversity, but also a threat to our ability to foster faculty diversity. Again, something that betters our campuses in ways both measurable and intangible. But there is an uncomfortable truth, and a hard one sometimes for us in the higher education sector to acknowledge, that the sector never used the tool of race-conscious admissions fully, or even very well, when we had free rein to do so. So much as we lament the misguided decisions of the Supreme Court, we have to acknowledge the fact that the higher education sector, even with the tool of race-conscious admissions, never achieved the full diversity for students, for faculty, for leadership that we could, should, and must. And that's particularly true at elite institutions. Now, higher education, I believe, is an opportunity to tackle our biggest challenges as a society through research and scholarship. And equity is absolutely essential to that pursuit. It's our pathway to a better world, and our certainty that diversity is vital to creating the world, that more prosperous, more equitable world, honors the history we can't afford to forget. History tells us what happens when medical professionals and scientific researchers and teachers and lawyers and software engineers lack diversity in their ranks, their leadership, and their perceptions. Medical devices and examinations and procedures and medications are designed for one type of person and one type of person only. People of color, women are left behind. Computer algorithms can victimize. Classrooms can develop bias. But we also know what happens when diversity, equity, and inclusion are done right. And the question I challenge us all with is, how extraordinary would it be if every campus and community with an imperfect history around race used its past to teach and to point toward better practices and policies? How much educationally poorer are those institutions that fail to do that? I'm proud to tell you that DEI is laced throughout everything we do at SUNY, because SUNY is an institution of public education, focused on opportunity, on upward mobility and equity, and on removing the broadest to the most niche barriers that prevent marginalized and underrepresented potential students from enrolling and graduating. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are both one of our 4 pillars of success, adopted as the foundation of our quest for excellence, and a primary ingredient in the other 3 pillars as well. So when we talk about our pillar of student success, we're talking about equitable success, success for all of our students, representative of New York State and the nation. When we talk about our pillar of scholarship and research, we're talking about grants for research on social justice, on educational inequity, on racial health disparities, on environmental racism, and research that is performed by diverse researchers. Because diverse researchers ask a different set of questions, a more nuanced set of questions, a more generative set of questions. When we talk about our pillar around driving economic development and upward mobility, we're talking about opening doors for a diverse workforce and closing wage gaps, employment gaps, and wealth gaps for communities that have grown used to pathways to success being blocked. And we realize that SUNY cannot be the premier system of public education in the nation without diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice at every level of our institution. So what are we doing? Well, one, on the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision, we have made clear to all of our campuses that we're going to incorporate the consideration of low income status, school and geographic diversity, veteran status, AmeriCorps alumni status, first gen status, for the purposes of outreach, recruitment, holistic admissions decisions, scholarships and financial aid, and pipeline and pathway programming initiatives. So we're going to use every available tool under the law to continue to advance diversity in our student body. We are working to make sure that our recruitment efforts reach to communities that have historically been underserved and underrepresented on our campuses. And we're thinking about that for our undergraduates, for our transfers, from our community colleges to our four-year institutions, for our graduate programs, for our professional schools. We are working to make sure we are reaching out to federally designated minority serving institutions as a pipeline for our graduate schools as well. We are also maximizing participation in our longstanding educational opportunity program, a program that over the decades has produced more than 80,000 graduates, folks who are in the legislature, leading major corporations throughout the state. The EOP program is based on income, not race, but has always been a pipeline of diverse candidates into our campuses and then on to successful leadership. We are working to ensure the diversity of our faculty. We have a Prodigy Plus initiative where we identify diverse postdocs and guarantee that when they complete that postdoc experience over 2 years successfully, there is a tenure track position waiting for them. And these are postdocs who are committed to addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we know our faculty needs to be representative of our students. We are implementing a general education requirement across our SUNY campuses, focus on diversity, equity, inclusion content. We have a Hispanic Leadership Institute to help us diversify our leaders on campuses. That's been longstanding. We just launched a Black Leadership Institute this past year, and we just secured funding from the legislature for a AAPI Leadership Institute, because we're committed that not only our faculties across our campuses have to look like the state, but so too our leadership. Ultimately, we are committed that even while other people are sliding backwards, we're going to keep pushing forwards on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The accomplishments at SUNY Optometry, I think, represent a great example of how resolute we are about this work and how honest we are about the work still to be done. I certainly want the whole of the SUNY Optometry community to know how committed we are to this work, to standing with you in this work and continuing to advance our priorities around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I guess I'd close with this, this reflection. You know, as I sit here, as I reflect, you know, we're still in the month of June. We just had Juneteenth. And as I reflect on my family journey, you know, I've been to the cabin in Maryland where my great-grandfather was enslaved. Think about that. You know, there are kids playing today with their great-grandparent. My great-grandfather was enslaved in a cabin in Maryland that's still standing. We are still that close to the history. But I also know that my family went from enslaved in that cabin to serving in the cabinet of the nation's first Black president. And so I know I'm here today because my ancestors lived with faith in a future they could not see. Because they were resolute, I'm alive today. The opportunities that I have, that my daughters have because of their perseverance, their faith in a more just future. And so my hope for all of us, even in this moment where the work we care about is under such attack from state legislatures and governors and sometimes the media, we have to stay resolute, because America's story like my family story, is a story of progress. Yes, with fits and starts. Yes, sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but progress. And we have to have faith that we can continue to push forward towards a better day. So thank you for letting me join you. It's going to be a wonderful panel discussion, and have a great night.
Thank you, Chancellor. Your participation is really greatly appreciated, and I'm sure your comments will be woven into the conversation that it ensues. I do just want to say that I think it's often been pointed out that the tone at the top is absolutely critical for institutional and systemic change. And it's clear that your tone is leading the university. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Have a good night. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to turn over the evening to our wonderful and well-recognized and established moderator, Dr. Joy Harewood. Joy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Heath, and thank you, Dr. King, for those opening and insightful and inspiring remarks, which I think should color and give really good texture to our conversation. The Race in Optometry webinars have been ongoing since July 5th of 2020. In the first session, we invited optometrists working in a variety of settings to talk about the issues faced by Black people in the optometric profession. The second and third webinars invited leaders in academia and then leaders in the eye care industry to discuss potential solutions, not just to diversify, but to uplift and support minoritized communities in our profession. Our goals in the fourth session were to provide a place for accountability and determine if our organizations, institutions, and key stakeholders had stayed the course in their equity and inclusion initiatives. Last year, our fifth session was actually held on the eve of that monumental SCOTUS decision that struck down racially conscious admissions at our schools. At that time, we had convened legal experts and other key stakeholders to determine how we continue to move forward given the headwinds to progress that we face. And tonight, actually, we are facing yet even more challenges. Consistent and sustained legislative pressure to dismantle equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives in many aspects of our society, but particularly in higher education. So we come together to discuss challenges, but also tools and solutions. We've brought together experts in diversity, equity, and inclusion, student affairs, public health, as well as representatives from the American Optometric Association, the American Academy of Optometry, the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry, and the National Optometric Association to speak on how we will continue to center equity and inclusion in our profession as we move forward. So I'm going to jump right in and start with our first panel, which do not require introduction, but I'm going to give you an introduction anyway. We have Dr. Guy Albieri, Vice President of Student Affairs and Engagement at SUNY College of Optometry. We have Dr. Ed Marshall, Professor Emeritus of Optometry and Public Health and past Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Multicultural Affairs at Indiana University, and Dr. Juliana Mosley-Williams, the Special Assistant to the President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Salus University. Welcome to all of you, and I will jump right in. The first question that I have is, what, if any, aspects of your work or work towards diversity, equity, and inclusion have you seen change since the implementation of the SCOTUS decision on racially conscious admissions? And let me start with Dr. Marshall, who I know can give us a wonderful historical perspective. So Dr. Marshall, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Harewood. Diversity in optometry obviously is impacted by diversity at the undergraduate level, and particularly within the pipeline, which already is terribly stressed. So for us in optometry, it's a double whammy, with changes occurring both at the undergraduate and graduate levels. I'm now retired, but when I was a university vice president, I had a broad portfolio of programs and initiatives across 7 campuses focused on recruitment, retention, and development, primarily at the undergraduate level, but also for faculty and staff. With the current climate and the fall elections coming too quickly, I believe, my fear is that we will encounter an increasingly conservative approach that could put some, if not all, of those programs that I used to oversee at risk. So then what happens at the undergraduate level obviously will have serious implications for the School of Optometry here at IU, as well as other schools throughout the country, particularly if minoritized students choose not to attend the university because of the state's political and social climate. I read recently that one survey last year found that 24% of prospective students ruled out schools based on state politics. However, I'm hopeful that the university will find a way to continue attracting and supporting students from racially and ethnically minoritized groups. However, I think it may be too early to really see the full impact of this SCOTUS decision. Although a number of experts believe that diversity within the medical education system will decline and result in increased health disparities among already marginalized groups, we have to obviously wait and see what happens as not only the SCOTUS decision plays out, but also what happens at the state level. So another concern of mine is that state legislation may essentially wind up being more restrictive than last year's SCOTUS decision. I am concerned as the conservative narrative continues to play out, we may find that any reference to anything remotely related to DEI, recruitment, financial aid, scholarships, and the use of terms like racism, sexism, homophobia may be banned in public education, and programs with increasing minority enrollment may come under greater scrutiny and the hostile view that enrollment is out of line with where the conservative view thinks it should be, even though those programs may not have any reference to DEI. So these are some of my concerns as to where we are today, but also where we may be headed to in the future.
Thank you for your comments. Dr. Mosley Williams, what are your thoughts?
Good evening. So in respect to kind of how my work or the work at PCL Salas has changed, not a whole lot, to be honest. While we have been very race conscious and aware in the past, we've also had the benefit of being one of the more racially diverse programs. And so we have the pool, if you will, because we have the applicant pool. And so one of the things that, of course, we did have to do is to make sure that we follow the letter of the law and the spirit of the decision, was to make sure that we set our systems, so our admission systems, to shield race, so that race would no longer be seen and be a factor at all in the admissions process. So the only person who actually, well, we have two people who can even see it, is the director and our tech person. And so when admissions counselors and faculty are now making decisions about students, they don't see race at all. It doesn't even come up in the system. So that was one of the tangible things that we had to do. Outside of that, I think we had to do a lot of education, right? So again, really the nature of what we do didn't change, but we had to do some wraparounds. So I worked specifically with admissions, and we made sure that we did training for all of our faculty who are involved in the interviewing and admissions process, to just reiterate what the law says, what the decision says, and so how to govern ourselves accordingly. I think the third part that we had to do then comes to play with the students, right? So even today, we had our optometry leadership experience program. So these are students who, of course, are thinking about the field of optometry. And even in my presentation to them today, I found myself talking a little differently about programs that we may have or scholarships that we may have, where I had to stress, while there might be some race-based things available, that they are only available once a student has been admitted to and accepted to the university, so that there was no discussion or thought that race ever becomes a factor, even with getting in, right? And so again, understanding the spirit of the decision and also keeping ourselves legal. So I think those are the changes, but in terms of our day-to-day, do we feel like we've seen, even in just this 1 year, a dip, you know, if you will, in terms of certain populations of color? No, we have not as a result of the decision itself. And I'll stop there because I just want to make sure I answered that question. So.
Thank you. And Dr. Albieri?
It's nice to see everyone. And I think that not much has changed and a lot has changed. What has not changed is our commitment to the cause. It's the fact that our mission remains the same, and diversity is at the very core of our mission. We continue to believe in the public value and the public good of a diverse class, of having graduates who are ready to serve diverse communities and that represent those communities, graduates that will be able to interact with patients, and that patients will be felt seen and heard, patients that will feel that their providers understand where they're coming from. So in that sense, we are very much still committed to the public good that diversity brings. We have not changed how we recruit. We are still, our strategy in terms of recruitment continues the same. We want to be an institution of choice for every underrepresented student in the nation. We just recently finished 2 pathway programs, our CSTEP, the Collegiate Science and Technology Entry Program, and the Eye Care Camp, which is a summer camp for our students. They were extremely diverse, well attended, and we're going to continue to put a lot of efforts in these programs. Our director of admissions, Dr. Alberto, delivered his now almost famous seminar on cultural wealth and how students can reflect upon their cultures and what they bring to the table in terms of their experiences, and how that can be perceived by the admissions committee as an added value to the program, and that could enhance their chances of being admitted. We also have a very diverse admissions committee that very much focuses on diversity and understands the value of diversity. We continue to use our social media strategy to push, like I said, the CSTEP program, Eye Care Camp campaigns to certain populations. So that's the part that has not changed. The part that has changed, of course, we had to blind race and ethnicity from the reviewers in the admissions process. However, I have to say something about that, because recently in conversation with other schools, particularly medical schools, they have not blinded it. And these are schools that are in states that are actually have been prohibited to use race in admissions a long time ago, either through the California Prop 209 or other state laws. And, you know, it's almost the argument that you're not supposed to be making decisions based on gender, and you still see the gender box on applications. And so that's something that can be discussed in a separate forum, but sometimes I think that we also have to be careful not to overreact to what the law says or does not say. We conducted anti-bias training with our faculty, actually delivered by our very own Dr. Harewood. And we're also relooking with, this is the lead of our director of admissions, we're relooking at how we look at the concept of holistic admissions and the holistic review of a file. We have done holistic review for a while now, but now we're going a little deeper. We're going from holistic file to holistic person, looking at the whole individual in terms of their personality, character, experiences, to context as well, or whole context. So whole file, whole person, and whole context. We're going deeper into what the holistic word really means, and how can we look at the experiences that these students have that may have contributed to their success or may have worked as additional barriers for those students to perhaps doing well in the school or achieving a good score on the OAT, for example. So those are the things that we are doing differently. And another aspect that we are, and this is not anything that is controlled by my office, but is on the C-STEP grant. This is a pathway program that we have. Since the decision was made, what C-STEP is doing through the legislative process here in New York State is to try to change the eligibility criteria. So they're not only looking at race in general, but they're looking at race based on specific professions. So they did a whole survey of every profession in the state and the racial representation in every single of those professions. And now if you're, for example, we know for a fact based on the survey that white males are underrepresented in nursing. So they would be eligible for a pathway program like C-STEP. But it does show that every other program, the typical underrepresented minorities that we work with, Black and African American and Hispanics, are underrepresented in most of the professions in the STEM field. So again, by working through the legislature, maybe we're trying to circumvent some of the challenges that this new decision has put in front of us.
Thank you for that. The next question that I have is, what is your opinion on the status of these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in optometry, given the current political and social climate? How are we moving through things? And let me start with Dr. Mosley Williams for this one.
Yeah, I think that the status for me, the way I see it is, given the political climate, I think that we have to figure out what are our workarounds, right? And so the workarounds, in my opinion, are through donors. Because the rule still stands. When people tell you that they're giving you money, you have to do with that money what they want you to do with that money. And so that becomes the crack in the system, if you will, that will allow for a lot of those special programs, the pathway, special initiatives to still exist. I can speak specifically to that, of course, at PCO Salis. Our summer enrichment program is externally sponsored and funded. When the decision came up, we were like, okay, what do we do? And when we looked at how students get into the program, it's already after they've been accepted. This is a program where we went back to the donors, knowing that the decision was coming, and said, hey, you tell us exactly what you want to have happen with your sponsored program. They said to us, we want this program to be for 3 specific racial groups because we understand the need to increase representation. And they restated that in writing. And so we have to do what they've told us to do. And we are excited about that, right? And so if that means that you find the workaround, you have to do that. One of the things that I've been telling people, as well as, you know, with all of the hoopla around, unfortunately, the anti-DEI movement, one of the things that happened in this country as a result of COVID was that we realized we are not faring well in terms of health equity, right? COVID was the great revealer. Here we are, air quotes on purpose, the most developed nation, right? And we failed. We failed miserably. We had too many severe cases. We had too many deaths. And so there's been this whole national movement and agenda to say we have to do better when it comes to health equity. We got to figure out these gaps and these holes, and how do we ensure that everyone has access to good treatment, right? And so my thought is, while the attack seems to be very heavily focused on education, is there an opportunity from that healthcare side, since people are still heavily focused on us doing the right thing by healthcare, to get advocacy going in a different way at that level, to then be able to kind of go back in and backdoor, if you will, the education piece, to say, hey, if we want to have a healthcare system that mimics the population that we serve, that mirrors that population, that hopefully ensures that people will be treated equitably, even fairly, we can say, then this is absolutely necessary, right? And so is there a way in those political conversations, as we focus on health, to then be able to realign the commitment for education, or again, find a couple more cracks in the system that allows us to do what we absolutely have to do if we want to be great caregivers of society. I mean, it's the only way we're going to make it. And yes, I am the one person on this panel who is not an optometrist, but clearly I need y'all in my life. So, but I just think that we have to figure out the way. And I think going the healthcare route, because we are trying to erase what happened, or not erase it, but fix what happened, may be our way in. And it's a backdoor way, but sometimes we got to go through the back door to still get into the place to still have a voice.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Marshall, what are your comments on status of our initiatives?
To pick up on Chancellor King's opening remarks, we do have to have faith in the future. With that said, we cannot deny that today we have a social and political climate fueled by a national campaign, as well as energized at the state level, that has DEI, or what we call DEI, as well as higher education in general, under siege, with misinformation, false narratives, and what the AAUP calls a manufactured crisis, leading to defunding, dismantling, and banning of DEI efforts across college campuses, along with attacks on board appointments, academic freedom, faculty governance, tenure, accreditation, and curricula, all to reflect a conservative agenda. So in terms of the healthcare world, we are part of essentially of a larger initiative to redefine, I think, higher education, absent anything that relates to DEI. We have seen that term weaponized in what's referred to by the conservatives as a zero-sum argument, essentially creating a type of a DEI phobia across the country. You may be aware that this past March, the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Education and Workforce hosted a hearing titled "Divisive, Excessive, and Ineffective: The Real Impact of DEI on College Campuses." The chair of that committee opened the meeting by stating, and I quote, "Today's hearing addresses a long-growing cancer that resides at the heart of American academic institutions. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI for short." In fact, one of the witnesses, a former member of the University of Pennsylvania medical faculty, testified that DEI, again, I quote, "DEI is dangerous everywhere, but it's most dangerous in medical school, where future doctors are being taught to discriminate by race, not treat patients equally." And then other witnesses went on to state that the mission of DEI is to perpetuate racism, and even conflated DEI with anti-Semitism and poor campus climate. So we have a tremendous task, I think, in addressing these negative currents as we go forward. I'm told, even though I'm retired, I'm told that here at IU, with respect to the School of Optometry, we are able to no longer offer our underrepresented minority-based scholarships, which also includes the matching awards that we had for the scholarships being provided by the National Optometric Association. I've endowed a scholarship at IU that's directed at diversity, but I've not yet been personally advised regarding any changes to the gift agreement relative to that scholarship, to say that I have to kind of take that diversity piece out of it. And if I do, then I'm going to get rid of this guy. I'm going to take my money and go elsewhere. So there are some challenges. So as higher education struggles, I think, to adapt to this new reality, we have to essentially unwed ourselves, our efforts from the term DEI. But remember also that our work in this space began long before the term DEI was introduced into our lexicon. So I am optimistically cautious about optometry and have used the phrase could happen as opposed to will happen in any of my assessments of the future as it relates to optometry going forward. And just to kind of highlight this, I understand that for the 2023-24 application cycle, there's a 4.5% increase in the Black African-American applicants compared to last year, although it's not as high as the percentage in 2021, I believe. But also the Hispanic numbers are at the highest level. So there is hope. But again, this is 1 year out from SCOTUS. We still have to see what's going on as we move forward. But again, I am optimistically cautious that we will be able to address these currents and continue the work that we started many years ago.
Dr. Alvieri, what are your thoughts on the status of our initiatives?
Well, just I wanted to say, Dr. Mosley Williams, I am with you. I am also not an optometrist, but yes, the status right now is, of course, of what I feel from other programs and individuals we talk to is one of fears, one of anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen in the future. But I also think that we need to focus on some good news, like Dr. Marshall just said. When you look at the number or the percentage of underrepresented students applying to optometry school, and right now we are at about 18%, which is much better than when you look at our data 9 years ago, for example. So we went from 13% to now 18%, and we have remained at this level for a certain period. I am still a little bit concerned. We have made a lot of gains with Hispanic students. I think we need to focus more on Black applicants, particularly Black male applicants, because the numbers are still suffering. But I think that it shows that we have been, as a profession, working really hard to put diversity where it belongs, which is at the forefront of what we do. I also think that the situation today is not what we are in a different space right now, in a different time. And we have case studies that we can revert back to. Arizona went through this years ago, Prop 209 in California in 1996 as well. And there are some lessons that we can learn in how they reacted to the prohibition of, or like Dr. King said very well, when those tools that we had were smashed. And of course, the holistic review being one of them. And I think that now most schools are already doing it, and we can only get better at that. Creating disadvantage scores. In California, they created this post-back consortium that increases the number of students in pathway programs to optometry, to the health professions in general, not only optometry. The health science academies, in which high schools created these academies to help students better prepare for a medical school, for example, and pathway programs, and particularly direct pathway programs. And I think that that's crucial here, because we all, in some way or another, most of us at least, run pathway programs, but they're not direct pathway programs. And I run a couple of them, and I am very proud of what we do. But just recently, I realized that we need to work better on creating direct pathways. For example, the Eye Care Camp is an amazing camp. We bring students together. They learn about optometry. Everyone who learns about optometry, as you all know, fall in love with optometry. That's not a question. But they have to then later on in the future apply for optometry school. what we are talking about are programs such as one of our peer universities here in the SUNY system. They have this program called Bridge Program, in which underrepresented students or students who come in with not the typical profile that you would get in a medical school, they can take the whole full first year, and then if they pass, they are allowed to repeat that first year again and continue into the program. And I think Salas PCO has a direct pathway program that is very successful. So we can look at other states that have gone through these issues and learn with them. And a little bit of good news as well that we are seeing, like Dr. Mosley Williams said, she hasn't noticed a lowering of numbers at Salas. We also learned, for example, like Dr. Marshall was talking about, the pipeline into undergraduate programs. There is a recent study that came out of the Common App that is somewhat encouraging, saying that the SCOTUS decision didn't really affect the number of historical trends in terms of the percentage of underrepresented students applying to college, in terms of behavior of students or behavior in general of students being selected or not selected. And what they have noticed is is that some students are talking more about their experiences as being racially minoritized and how those experiences impacted who they are today. And I think that that's where we need to start coaching students and talking more about that. So it's complicated, but I think that we do have positive case studies that we can go back to, learn from, and have hope for a better future.
Now we are almost about to move to our second set of panels, but I'd like to give each of you about a minute to give us your, maybe one or two top ideas that you think are important for us to think about as we move forward to make sure that we keep pushing these initiatives forward. And let me start with Dr. Marshall.
If we look at the SCOTUS decision, let's take Chief Justice Roberts, for his word, in his writing of the majority opinion, and focus on, or actually prioritize, the lived experiences of our applicants, and use that as context, for their academic achievements and the diversity of perspectives they would bring, as part of what I'm going to call a socially oriented, mission-driven admissions criteria. And we tie that criteria or translate it to merit. And translate, but basically, let me back up. Let's translate merit to the attributes that we will identify or deem important to advancing clinical practice and providing competent patient care to diverse populations. So my gist here is that the emphasis seems to be, from the conservative perspective, on merit. But we need to kind of, I think the last seminar talked about maybe redefining merit and putting merit in the context of what it is that we want to see in a clinician as it relates to addressing diverse populations. So if we look at our missions and define our mission as a socially conscious mission, then we look for students who have those attributes that will identify with that mission and use that as part of the criteria for bringing those students into the profession.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Mosley Williams, your 1 or 2 minute suggestion.
Yeah, so I would look at where we have seen an increase, in particular with Black and Latino students going to college, is definitely been at the undergraduate level, and specifically at historically Black colleges and universities. They are the one institutions that are having an increase. And so I think there is an opportunity to go back with a different type of recruitment process, if you will, than what we have traditionally done. right? In the past, and I've worked at 4 HBCUs, so in the past, people come in from other schools and they're like, oh, we want your students, and they just want to come down, and then they want to throw kind of a program and an opportunity for a student to apply. HBCUs have realized in many aspects that they have been used, trying to choose my words carefully, I want to say something else, but they have been used and almost abused in this regard of just kind of being kind of these fish ponds that everybody just wants to come in and grab their bait, right? And so now what a lot of HBCUs are saying is, what's in it for us? What can you do for us? So I think there's a real opportunity for the optometry schools to go into HBCUs and establish some programs that will help to better prepare the students to even apply. That way the HBCUs are also getting something out of this in terms of them having maybe better academic support measures, things of that nature. And then you are creating a different type of pipeline for those students to then be able to apply. And it really helps us on both ends, right? We get the increase of students that we want, but they're also better prepared to even come into our institutions, which hopefully leads to the end goal of having more doctors that are representative of society.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Albieri, your 1 minute suggestion.
Oh, I need 5. We need courage, we need determination. And I think that the way to move forward is through collective action. I think that as institutions, we need to come together to define a common agenda, to define mutually reinforcing activities, and have shared management, shared measurements. And we need to bring different schools together. We need to bring ASCO, we need to bring the AOA, we need to bring NOAA, we need to every organization that has some skin in this game together to create a common agenda and to create shared measurements, a shared list of activities that we can agree upon, that we can hold each other accountable and follow it. I also think that ACOE is another organization that needs to be involved. When you look at medicine, look at what they have done with Elements 3.3. I can't talk about that, I don't have time, but look at what they have done through the accreditation bodies, having shared goals that every school has to a certain degree or another to follow. And at the end of the day, we need to be better at strategizing. They made a move, we have to make counter moves and keep the flame alive. If anything, this has really given us the fire that we need to continue on this mission. And at the end of the day, you know, we had a box. Talk about thinking outside the box. We have no box to think outside. Now we can create our own new realities as well right now. And I think that through collective action is the only way that we can do that. I know it's a big, huge undertaking, but I think it can be done.
Thank you for that. And thank you to all of you for your wonderful contributions to this conversation. We're going to move to our next set of panelists who represent many of the optometric organizations that we all know. We have Dr. Vondalie Delgado-Nixon, Chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee at the American Academy of Optometry. Dr. Lucy Kahinde Darnell, representative of the Diversity and Cultural Competency Committee at ASCO, the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry. Dr. Curtis Ono, who's on the Board of Trustees of the American Optometric Association. And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Mark Urso, the President-elect of the National Optometric Association. Now, before we decide to look forward, I would love all of you just to take a brief moment to look back and comment on what your organization has done to push progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the profession over, I would say, the last 1 to 2 years. And let's start with Dr. Urso.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure and honor to be on this panel. As a representative of the NOA and Dr. Frank Barnes and our founders, Dr. C. Clayton Powell and Dr. John Howlett, we welcome this forum. As far as the NOA is concerned, in our last few years, we have definitely pushed our efforts towards the HBCUs And that's our main thrust, that we get their best students and prepare them for entrance into the colleges of optometry. So there are numbers that I can quote if one needs to hear it, but with the help of Dr. Paula Boone and VSP and the NOF, that's our main main thrust, is to go into these universities and let them know about the great field of optometry.
Wonderful. Dr. Delgado Nixon, how has the Academy been doing?
Thank you, Dr. Harewood. I appreciate being part of this panel and representing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging Committee of the American Academy of Optometry. We've done a lot. I would say there really has been a sea change in many ways at the Academy. When Sue Cotter became the president, she took advantage of that, and really we've talked in these series on race and optometry about structures, and really creating structures includes at the leadership level, at the committee level. And under her guidance, she's appointed over 33 underrepresented individuals in optometry, 24 Black, 8 Latinx, to the various committees of the Academy, and that was in her first year of her term. And by the way, there was at least one Black member in, let's see, I gotta look at my numbers here, there's so many. 21 of 22 committees now include at least one African-American member. That's huge. And you might say, okay, well, it's one thing to have members, but 9 service chairs or vice chairs. So that's leadership. They're all also, there's a lot of relatively young individuals. And that's also important because that means there's a longevity there, right? There's going to become some institutional memory that can grow. That's a really big change. In addition, she's got, let's see, at least one Asian member on each committee. And this year, she had 10 committee spaces or positions available, and she appointed another 5 underrepresented individuals, Black, Hispanic, as well as Native American. That's structural. We also have changes in our structures of our SIG. So we have the Salud SIG, which is for Latinx and Latinx community, an LGBTQ group. Our website and links are also there. And I would just say also take a moment when you come to our annual meeting. We have made a lot of changes in our accessibility, particularly as it relates to vision. It's kind of funny. We don't even think about that as diversity, but of course, as low vision experts, making sure the font sizes are correct and contrast is correct is actually really important. We've had increased number of courses related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and health, public health. We've had a plenary by Dr. Tatum, and so many different things. So we're really, really proud. It's been a big change, and it's been a wonderful movement.
And that's incredibly impressive. You didn't even speak about the appointment of yourself and the establishment of your committee.
Oh, yes, that's right. I'm the inaugural chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee, which didn't used to exist. So it's pretty fantastic.
It really is. Dr. Kehinde Darnell, what about ASCO? How are we doing there?
ASCO is busy. The Diversity and Cultural Competency Committee has been very busy. I'll just list a few things that I'm really, really proud of. It partnered with Johnson & Johnson on the ASCO's Eye on Diversity Speaker Series. Hopefully you all had a chance to view that. There was a recent establishment of a Chief Diversity Officers group within ASCO now, and the SIG and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion SIG has been working hard on updating the guidelines for culturally competent eye care and eye and vision care. That has been around since 2008. It's now 2024. Time to revise some things, but incredible work was done on the front end. And now the updates, I think, be amazing. And then kind of touching on what Dr. Delgado Nixon mentioned was that we had a chance to collaborate with the public health and environmental vision section on our at the Academy meeting, we had a chance to deliver a joint symposium on social determinants of health. So I'm really proud of that. There's a whole list of things, including our town hall meetings that we had over the past year. So I'll just pause there.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Ono, how's the AOA doing?
Well, just like the others, it's such a privilege to participate in this. And that in the past, the AOA board members have participated in this webinar series, and it's like me, I want to be my turn. I want it to be my turn because this is a subject that I'm personally committed to. Unlike the NOA and other organizations, AOA was really not active in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts. That's, just all honesty. But societal events and AOA looking at DEI issues, it's no surprise, that we determine that we must be in this area, in this space. And you can kind of say, in a way, it instigated an awakening in this area for AOA. We did a lot of listening, a lot of connecting, a lot of learning, a lot of being challenged by people that respect in this area. Again, not being in the space before, we were not experts in this. We were elementary school students, but we really wanted to learn. So we had a diversity, equity, inclusion training for all of us, all the board members, as well as the staff at AOA as well. We need to build that foundation. Certainly, I don't think this is a surprise. We did a lot of introspection and self-development, but we found that each of us were in such different spaces, such different areas, because we have and come from such a diverse background. But we were assigned reading assignments, watching videos, watching this webinar and listening, having conversations. And as you know, when you get into this space and you talk about it, especially when we're all in different levels, we can hit on some pretty powerful conversations and sometimes very personal, hurtful conversations. So, again, need to advance in order to be able to recognize that. So the board did develop a task force. I had the privilege of serving on that. They were all board members. Well, fast forward, and just like the Academy, we have determined that it's not just a task force. It's not a beginning and an end. It's not a 12-month looking at where we are. It needs to be ingrained and be part of our structure. So we now do have a DEI committee. This started back in 2023. It's made up of some pretty passionate members. Brianna McGee, William Jackson, Jeffrey Wilson are three that serve on the committee, and some AOA board members as well. And, really we determined that school, what they're looking at is school enrollment and the applicant pool, also culturally competent care, as well as testing fairness. And then going back to the applicant pool, you would have asked us 10 years ago, AOA, about the applicant pool, and we would have probably said, you know what? That's not our alley. That's not our space. But, again, through conversations, it is our space. We all need to be involved. We all are responsible to have optometrists be from diverse communities that we are serving. And we know that patients trust doctors more if they can relate to them, if they're from the same community. So part of that is the opportunity in optometry grants. It gives $1,500 to people applying to optometry school. We know how expensive it is, whether it is interviews, whether it is getting into a tie, whether it is preparing for the OAT, taking the OAT. And we have given out 73 awards thus far. And we're really looking at, again, those underrepresented minorities. 94% were women, not a surprise. A lot of women are applying to optometry school, but 75% were Black and African American, and 25% were Hispanic and Latinx. Again, really kind of earmarking those funds to underrepresented minorities. Also, it's our responsibility to build leaders. So we have a Leadership Institute. We have over 300 graduates, and we really look at a diverse group. But more than that, also introducing them to the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion, introducing themselves to the fact that we need to provide culturally competent care, introducing them to the fact that we really want to attract the best, brightest, most diverse professionals to our organization and to our profession serving our patients. So, I guess I will say where we have come, AOA has come, is really just foundationally knowing that we need to be in this space. We are committed in working in this area and partnering with others. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now, we know that there's lots of anti-DEI legislation, and as leaders, national leaders in optometry, how have you or how will you respond to this anti-diversity, equity, inclusion legislation? Let's start with Dr. Kehinde Darnell.
Sure, thank you. I think I kind of speak to this being able to really empathize. I'm in the state of Texas. We've had some swift changes that have occurred. We've had to adapt, recognize what we can do within the confines of, what our education code states that we need to do. So that has really informed and framed my contributions in ASCO and the DCCC. But I think the main thing is that we maintain an honest and transparent dialogue about the challenges and be specific about naming them, and then really careful and specific about providing resources to schools in all the states who might have a varying degree of restrictions. So our main goal is to provide support and advocacy and resources throughout the life cycle, whether it's on the admissions end, who are the students we're attracting? Are we defining top talent in an appropriate way? Is it just the 400 and the 4.0? Or are there some characteristics that we're missing out on actively seeking, some resilience and tenacity and coping skills in stressful situations that are really hard to elucidate on paper? Like, it really takes a really robust interview and things like that. So one of the goals that we're trying to accomplish is to put together a holistic admissions toolkit. We need to define what holistic really means, and then be really intentional about framing it and providing the resources for every institution to use it in a way that makes sense demographically and geographically for them. And still, ASCO and DCC and the website is a great resource. If you click through there, you'll see all types of things about DEI and belonging, this virtual cultural competency workshop information, the Eye and Vision Care Toolkit I mentioned, case studies on cultural competency, so we can see how these things play out in an exam lane, which is where all of this kind of comes down to. How are our patients being taken care of? And an anti-racism compiled resource list, all kinds of things still on the website, and they'll continue to grow. And I think that's the way that we're kind of plowing forward in the face of these challenges.
And Dr. Orso, how is the NOA responding to these challenges?
Well, as a member of NOSA at NOA for over 40 years, I will say that it's not going to, this decision is not going to stop us. This is at the core of our mission, to advance the visual health of minority populations. So the NOA is C. Clayton and Dr. Hallett. This is what it was invented, established for. So we can't change what we do. And, to be blunt, we're not asking for a handout as the NOA. We're going to produce students, and we're going to get them in schools. And I mean, it's enlightening to me that, hey, we don't want you to look at race. We're gonna get some candidates. We always have provided candidates that are very intelligent, because we don't want students to come in and be let in, and they're not qualified because they're not going to matriculate through the school. So we don't want that as the NOA. So we pick and choose candidates that are qualified and great. Don't look at race. Let's go on the qualifications of the merit of the student. But you know, in essence, I would like to read the position of the NOA as stated, you know, from Dr. Jones and Dr. Barnes, that as leaders in optometry, we recognize the profound impact of the recent anti-DEI legislation on our profession's core values. In response, we are steadfast in our commitment in upholding equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. We actively engage with legislators and advocate for policies that support a diverse workforce and equitable patient care. Despite the legislative challenges, our dedication to DEI remains unwavering. We will continue to enhance recruitment strategies that prioritize diversity, cultivate inclusive practice environments, and promote professional development opportunities for underrepresented groups. These efforts are crucial in fostering a profession that reflects the diverse communities that we serve. Regarding language, we continually evaluate our communication strategies to ensure that they reflect inclusive practices. This includes using terminology that respects and embraces diversity, amplifies marginalized voices, and promotes understanding among our peers and patients alike. To advance our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, we are expanding partnerships and organizations that share our values, the AOA, the AAO, the VSP, ASCO, and BEP, Black Eye Care Perspective. Collaborative initiatives focus on mentorship programs, educational outreach, and policy advocacies to create lasting change within our profession. In conclusion, as the NOA and leaders in optometry, we're dedicated to building a profession that celebrates diversity and ensures equitable access to eye care for all. Despite SCOTUS legislative, you know, decisions, together we will continue to strive for excellence in our inclusive environment that embraces the richness of human diversity. So that's our position. And so in essence, you know, to be blunt, we're not going to change what the NOA does.
Thank you for that. Dr. Delgado Nixon, how is the Academy responding to this?
Well, as leaders in optometry and vision research and continuing education, and making sure that we're creating a diverse workforce to meet the needs of our diverse population. I think one of the biggest things that we're doing is being a safe harbor in many respects for our schools and colleges. We're trying to be out front. Hopefully you all have noticed that we have a diversity webpage, and our president immediately once the anti-DEI legislation came forward, we had a meeting and said we really need to be on top of this. We need to be a voice, and we need people to see that the Academy is supporting diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and who better than the president to talk about that? And so she actually posted a video. We've also had our committee members, including yourself, create really great blogs that, you know, are trying to stay up on top of things. So that way it's a very active area. I think you're going to see more videos coming around from our committee as well. So we're not going to go quietly into the night. We're going to, if anything, it allows us to redouble our efforts. There's nothing wrong with being inclusive. There's nothing wrong with having diverse thoughts. It makes us better. The data is there, and the Academy is all about research. And you go anywhere and it will tell you that diverse teams, diverse people bring different perspectives, and that's everybody, and create faster problem solving and better problem solving. And the way that we're going to tackle some of our healthcare needs is by leaning into that and not shying away from it.
I appreciate that. Now, Dr. Ono, I'm particularly interested in how you all are responding, because legislative efforts are your wheelhouse. So how are you responding to these anti-DEI claims?
Well, I think what's interesting is to see DEI go from something pretty popular that everybody will just say they're in the DEI space and doing work on behalf of DEI because it was a popular thing to do. And then when there is that turn, when suddenly it's a bad terminology, then I think it's just like all of you. If people are staying in that space and continuing to do the work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging issues, those people are in it for the long run. In other words, you stay into something that is, that is good for the profession, is good for your membership, but honestly, good for our patients. I mean, drill down. That's what we're here for. That's what all of us are practicing for, is to provide that best care to the patient. So to answer that, we kind of look at it as a learning opportunity. This anti-DEI sentiment, we are challenged sometimes. We have 30,000 members, 50,000 if you include staff and if you include our international category. So we have over 50,000 members, and we are going to be challenged sometimes. We are going to be challenged about why are we doing this? And it's a great opportunity for us to educate, to us to be able to put it in terms, as you said, Joy, advocacy is kind of the blood that runs through our veins. Although I will argue we're also other things other than advocacy, but that is kind of what we're most known for. And if we can put that language, the same language that we use for other things like scope expansion, accessibility, and et cetera, to DEI issues, like in culturally competent care is good care, like the data shows that we're going to be making more of a difference if, again, we're from diverse communities. If we can walk in somebody's shoes, we're going to be able to have that empathy, but also that understanding in what's going to make a difference in that patient's life with their eyes. So we are using it as an opportunity to educate. And again, this isn't something that we've worked in this space forever, but we've really found that when we talk in terms of the advocacy for the patient and patient care, it really does resonate, and it does give people that opportunity and that awareness that, yeah, we need to do this. And again, popular things are easy to get on the bandwagon. Sometimes the unpopular things are not, and that's where we view ourselves as a component of that, leaders within the profession, and this is an example of leading.
Now I'm going to invite all the entirety of the panel, all the panelists back in just a moment. But before we do that and get to some of the questions that we have in the chat, I would like each of you, just like the first panel, to give your, 1 to 2 minute idea of, what do we do concretely to move forward? How do we, whether it's leveraging partnerships or what are your recommendations from a national organizational level that we do to move forward? And let me start with Dr. Delgado-Nixon.
Well, thank you, Dr. Harewood. I think that one of the things that is really important was touched upon earlier, which is the collaborative nature. Even things like this, our preparation, we had to talk before, we've been emailing, a lot of us are interacting more. And I think that's been a really unique thing. And I think your first panel mentioned that as well. Optometry is kind of unusual that way. All the organizations are also talking, and we are working together and harnessing that diversity within ourselves. We find a problem, you get a lot of people together, and we can all think about different ways that our different organizations can leverage their members, their mission, their sponsors to do big things. And I think that's also really important, is that we keep in mind, we're not afraid. We're not afraid to do big things. We're going to try them and see where they go. And I think you're going to see that that we're going to do more things. I'm very, very hopeful that with NOA, with the AOA, ASCO, ACOE, Black Eye Care Perspectives, Boone, Dr. Boone and HBCU group, all of our students, our faculty, our allies. There's a motor running, and I don't think it's going to slow down.
I appreciate that. And Dr. Orso, your 1 minute synopsis, what do you recommend that we do?
Just to ditto Dr. Delgado Nixon, that's perfect. Just the collaboration, Dr. Ono had said it too. I think that if one looks down into their heart of hearts and be a moral person and a caring person and a God-fearing person, that this is a no-brainer. Just be fair across the board and work together to be fair and treat each other as equals and as family. It's a no-brainer. It's gonna happen. So yep, just the collaboration and just being a fair person. So.
I appreciate that. And Dr. Kehinde Darno, what's your 1 minute synopsis?
I think I can do it in less than one, but ASCO represents the interests of all its member institutions. And I think as the DCCC continues to work on it through its strategic plan and make all these resources available, that the institutions actually avail themselves of these resources and tap into the things that have been curated for them, and then give feedback and see that how it helped and how it didn't. And then we'll continue to keep building and providing.
And Dr. Ono, your 1 minute pitch.
Yeah, it's that theme of we're going to be much more powerful together if we work together. Not with AOA, it's with their affiliates, including the Student Association, who continues to challenge us and continues to be able to incorporate us in the conversations. With NOA, Larry Jones is a great friend of mine. He just practices down the street from me, but I see him more at national meetings than live locally. And Black Eye Care Perspectives, we did sign on to the 13% promise. And both of those illustrations is that we had optometrists meeting in Nashville last week on Wednesday, Juneteenth. We were able to have Larry Jones kind of kick us off on our celebration of opening the meeting, but also Black Eye Care Perspectives also challenging us by both having their presentation allyship as leadership skills, harnessing privilege for positive change. Very well received. I've seen this a couple of times, and it's each different because the conversations from participants are very different, as well as we had a leadership panel and entitled Courageous Conversations with Black Eye Care Perspectives. But I will tell you, it's about our own personal mentorship and our own personal influences. I'll give you an example. 6 years ago, I had somebody come with another person to where I was sitting, and basically the first thing they said, here's an Asian leader. Here's an Asian leader. And what that meant to me is that there's not enough Asian leaders within AOA, and there's not enough within our affiliates. When you look at the House of Delegates, we are underrepresented in leadership. We have 17% or something Asian Americans as members of the AOA, but it's us as a community to be able to really make a difference. So that's what I would say, that we should all be challenged just on a personal level. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I would like to invite all of our panelists back, because we have some questions that I think would be very interesting to be commented on. And also I know that we run out of time so quickly on these panels because there's so much interesting things to talk about. The one question I'd like us to tackle is, this comes from Dr. Shoge. Thank you, Dr. Shoko. While it's been encouraging to hear panelists mention the anti-affirmative action decision hasn't had a direct impact on the diversity of their student body, should we be concerned that this sentiment may give the impression that SCOTUS arriving at that decision was okay? Now I won't hand the mic to anybody, but any who'd like to tackle that.
Actually, Dr. Harewood, I saw the question from Dr. Shogay earlier. And so I don't think it will give the impression. I think that we do need more time, right? This decision literally came, we're 1 year ago, 1 year past the decision. So of course, students who were already applying were already in the pipeline, things of that nature. I think that we're going to have to wait and be a good 3 years out from the decision to see if there is a decrease, if you will, in certain populations of students who are not making it through our admissions process. I just think we're a little too early to tell. If we give it more time, we'll be able to see what the impact is and then be in a better position to, I don't know, fight for the issue, point the finger, whatever. But I think hopefully if we do some of the things that we talked about, which is to maintain what we've been doing and keep the momentum, then perhaps we won't see it. And if that's the case, I think we still have to find other ways to make sure that nobody thinks that it was just the right decision to make, but that we hopefully have better prepared students. I think Dr. Marshall said it earlier, that if they want to play the merit game, then we need to make sure that all of our students are prepared to be able to get into our programs based on their merit, and that race does not have to be considered. So I just think that this should push us even more to put all of these other measures in place so that hopefully we won't see our decrease in our numbers. And if somebody seems to think that it's because the powers that be made the right decision, they'll just figure out that we had, again, that crack that allowed us to keep growing.
I appreciate that. Now I see a question that I think we may have answered, which is whether or not through applications and essays, we're able to consider somebody's race because they can express their experience. So I think we went through that. The one that I'm going to touch upon before I hand things over to Dr. Heath to close us out is really just talking about our materials and the way that we market ourselves. Are there ways in which we can change our materials and the way that we educate and market? For example, speaking about glaucoma to patients in underserved areas, are there recommendations that you would say that we should do to make sure that the materials that we're providing to patients are reflective of the aims and the things that we were talking about in this particular webinar? And I'll leave that to anybody.
Can I step into that a little bit?
Sure.
I think that I think it's something that we have to be vigilant about, and constantly reviewing our materials that we provide, whether it's a lot of it's going to be on digital media and social media now. So I think being really aware when folks are posting. I will say kind of a nod to our previous panel discussion about collaborations. There are several committees that have gotten together over the past year that have identified that some of the vision therapy cards are antiquated and racist and show stereotypical images that really shouldn't be in the clinic. And there's a lot of different organizations that are working towards trying to remove those cards and educate the broader optometric VT specialists to go through their own cards and remove some of those cards that are just old and need updating. So there's a lot of things that need to be done.
I appreciate that. And with that, thank you so much for your wisdom, your expertise, everybody on this panel. This was absolutely educational for everybody involved. And Dr. Heath, I'll give it to you to close things out.
Thanks very much, Dr. Hayward. I think as most of you know, and perhaps most of the people online know, I'm retiring from presidency. It gives me an opportunity to be a little reflective. And as I was listening to our panelists, I started really reflecting back on this series. This is our 7th. I remember early conversations with Dr. Marshall, and talking about the history of many of these efforts for diversity, going back certainly to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and the tendency for things to rise and ebb, based upon funding levels. It was referred to earlier in the conversation tonight, that people get on board when it's popular and then they tend to get off when it's not. I would share with you in the very beginning, when we started this in 2020, it was originally going to be a short 3-part series. And we then decided that for the sake of accountability based upon those conversations, that we really needed to do it on an annual basis. And we picked a time around Juneteenth to sort of bring it to the forefront. And so some of the question becomes, well, what's been the impact? How are we doing? When I first called our national organizations, not including, the NOA, this has been their mission all along. But when I called our other organizations, there was a real hesitancy, not because they didn't recognize it was an important issue, but because they knew they hadn't been doing that much in the space and that there wasn't that much to say. In the last 4 years, I actually take a positive, even with a lot of the anti-DEI legislation, the Supreme Court decisions. But from this conversation, what I'm seeing is now when I call one of your organizations, it's like, oh, good, yes, I want to be a part of this. And part of it is because our organizations are doing things, and they are not simply doing things, but they're actually sort of integrating it into their structure. Perhaps not to the level of their DNA yet, but they're persisting. They're consistent, in terms of their desire and their interest to get better. And outside, and I'd like to think that this conversation has helped to catalyze some of the collaboration between organizations. But certainly this is once a year, and outside the organizations are talking to each other. There are more partnerships. And in some ways, when you see that happening, one of the partners lagging behind becomes embarrassing. And, perhaps all of the organizations working together are more likely to be successful. So, I thought tonight's conversation was a very good one. One that, in spite of some unfortunate realities, still sounded kind of optimistic. I don't want to get overly enthusiastic about how far we've come because there's so much further to go. But I do reflect, and Ed, I'll call you out on this a little bit. I think this will continue. I don't see anybody backing away from the issues, even with the barriers, or as we placed it, the headwinds, that are in front of us. I actually do want to, give a little call out to Dr. Marshall as our statesman historian on these issues. Ed, are you optimistic?
Dave, as I said earlier, I'm cautiously optimistic. I look at this as a hiccup along a very long path. It's not a minor hiccup. It's a pretty large hiccup, but nevertheless, I think the journey will continue. And I think just like what we saw in 2020, there was a lot of energy came out of 2020 because of some negative realities. I think we'll probably see a similar type of energy coming out of this. Many times, through adversity, we become creative. And I think we will have to become more and more creative in order to deal with those headwinds as we kind of take our journey along this sea of unknowns.
Well, thank you. With that, I don't know if Dr. Harewood, do you have anything else to say? But I do want to thank all of the panelists. And certainly, as this is probably my last year of participation in the discussion in the panel, it's been an honor for SUNY to host the conversation, and I fully expect that it will continue to do so. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you.